Hi YouTubers. So the short version of DOMA. How do we do that? Okay, simple this. The woman that's sued has won twice. She won at the trial level, she won at the appellate level, but Congress wasn't happy with that, specifically not just Congress, but the House of Representatives. They were angry because the president decided he wasn't going to defend DOMA because he thought it was unconstitutional. So the House of Representatives hired their own attorney, and they sued to the Supreme Court because the president refused to defend an unconstitutional law. It's very simple. So what's going to happen? Most likely what's going to happen? The Supreme Court is going to rule that DOMA is unconstitutional. And as soon as they do, it's going to open up a whole different world. Because one of the things that is so important in DOMA, most people don't understand, the federal Constitution provides for full faith and credit. Now, this clause in the federal Constitution, a lot of people don't understand, but just to be clear so you understand what it means, it's very simple. If I go to, okay, let's say I live in Texas, and I go to Louisiana, and I sue somebody that lives in Louisiana, and I get a judgment. So the court says, so-and-so owes you money. And that individual gets up and leaves Louisiana and moves to Alabama. Full faith and credit clause in the United States Constitution says I can take that judgment that I got in Louisiana and I can go to Alabama and Alabama will enforce that judgment. Okay? So, the same clause is the one that says if you get married in New York and you move to Maryland, that the courts in Maryland must divorce you because they respect the fact that you're married based on your marriage license from New York. Okay, so here's the significance of DOMA. DOMA had a little note in it that said, because they feared that the state of Hawaii in 1996 was going to approve gay marriage, what they did is they recognized that the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution was going to mean that all other states would have to recognize that marriage as legal. So DOMA says, for full faith and credit purposes, those marriages will not be considered. So that means that if you get married in one of the 9 states that has legalized equal marriage, and then you get moved to another state because of your job, and you want to get divorced, you can't. You can't because DOMA says you can't. And the states don't have to allow you to divorce because DOMA says that in the marriage context, full faith and credit is suspended. So, the great significance of what could happen if DOMA gets turned over, which I believe it will, and I think most experts in the legal world believe that too, then what the most significant impact that's going to have is that all of you who are wanting to get married and are same-sex, you can run off to one of these states that will allow that. Massachusetts, New York, what is it, Illinois now, is that right? Maryland, Vermont, I mean, there's like 9 different states. Washington State. Run off, get married, and then, of course, after Prop 8 falls, California will be State 10. You can get married in one of those states, and then you go back to your home state, and they have to at least recognize your marriage for purposes of divorce. So if you decide it doesn't work out, not that I'm, like, dissing your relationship or nothing, but if you do decide that for some reason or another you got married and you don't want to be married, they'll have to divorce you. Because the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution will make it so, number one. So, What does this mean to the future? It means a couple of things. If DOMA is defeated, which is the more important of the two, although my friends in California would like to differ with that, the reality is, on the grand scale of the entire nation and marriage equality as a whole, the DOMA ruling is so much more significant for this reason. The DOMA ruling will turn the Defense of Marriage Act into an unconstitutional law, which means it's illegal, which means the law no longer exists. Once that happens, then those states where people have been legally married and then relocated to states that don't recognize that marriage, they must grant divorces for the purpose of complying with the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution. They're not going to do it. They're going to fight it, and another case will go to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court will rule, eventually, that they have to apply and adhere to the United States Constitution. Once the states that don't wish to recognize gay marriage start having to at least recognize their divorces, it's going to become so troublesome to them that people are leaving the state to get married, and then they come back and they have to live there, and they're legally married, and that has to be respected by the state they live in, that it's going to become sort of stupid for some of these states not to accept marriage equality. And it's going to start trickling through, and you're going to see this rapid succession of state after state falling into the marriage equality fold, so to speak. So that's the general idea, and that's kind of where it's going to go. I do have one other video to make, and I'm going to make that in just a minute because it's a personal video, but I wanted to get these two things on the table to kind of help people understand what it means legally, the significance of these cases. I know you guys have been watching your Facebook, and a lot of stuff's been going on, and maybe nobody's really kind of explained to you the significance of what goes on here, but at the end of this entire exercise, when we get to June, or late June, early July, when the Supreme Court finally rules, I think what you're going to end up with ultimately is this. The state of California is going to have gay marriage legal because Proposition 8 will be ruled unconstitutional based on the Ninth Circuit's ruling that it's unconstitutional. Because the Supreme Court's going to dismiss this case because the people that sued don't have standing. That's the Prop 8 case. The DOMA case, on the other hand, the Supreme Court's going to find a very narrow window of standing just for Congress in order to be able to rule on the merits of the case, and then they're going to say that DOMA is unconstitutional. And they will overturn DOMA, which means that the very next moment it will suddenly not exist. And all of the rights that are afforded to married couples defined by each state will be married for federal purposes, and all 1,193 laws will apply to everybody. So there you go. That's the simple layman's version of the whole bang. Alright guys. Peace.